Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Emily Chan, naturopathic doctor. And today we're going to talk about some lifestyle hacks for different adrenal fatigue types or different stress types. So we're talking about this as part 2 to what we've gone over in the previous module where we discussed about an eating plan with macronutrients that would be helpful for supporting the adrenal health. So today we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about the 3 different types of adrenal dysfunctions and what state you may possibly be in at a certain time of your life and what we can do in those particular states to fine-tune the body and move to a more thriving state. So we'll talk about some adrenal secrets for having better health, having peace, as well as feeling a sustained energy level. And this is really, really important because many of us are feeling the effects of adrenal fatigue, whether we know it or not. And this is happening earlier and earlier as well with even college students where they're starting to feel burdened with their health pool, and that affects other systems such as their hormones, their thyroid, their reproductive hormones as well. So we want to do this to help your body. So not only to feel better, because when you get a signal in your body of feeling perhaps a little bit more stressed, a little bit more tired, at first it's really easy to ignore these signs. But what happens is that wears on your body overall, and it predisposes you to more chronic diseases that can affect your life. And we'll look a little bit later that data and studies are starting to show this correlation between how when our cortisol levels don't work out well, we're more prone to disease. And so this program today of what we're going to talk about is really going to help you to have those lifestyle tools, really basic tools, even sometimes a change in the timing of some good thing that you do. When do you do it? And when you have the keys to that, that can help balance your body system. So we're getting tools to reset your adrenal glands, to balance your cortisol. And if you're eating according to what we talked about last time, and you're needing to lose some weight, you are very likely to be able to lose about 1 to 2 inches off your waistline in about 30 days and lose about 4 to 5 pounds in 30 days. And if you don't need to lose weight, you can often change your body composition if your weight is going to stay the same, where you have more increase in muscle mass compared to fat mass. So then muscle mass is important to help your body be more resilient to fighting infections. And actually, if you have more muscle mass, if in the event you were succumbing to an injury or had to deal with cancer or any chronic disease, you're more likely to recover when you have more muscle mass. So as your adrenal glands are working well, you'll be able to build muscle more easily. If you're too stressed, you're going to start to accumulate fat and lose muscle. And then lastly, of course, wanting to feel more vibrant. So we talked about lots of detail in our previous module about macronutrients, which means your proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, those big molecules that you eat called food every day. And to summarize about timing of eating, it's really best that you eat most of your protein in the morning. So Americans tend to have carbs for breakfast, like cereals, pastries, coffee. So that really sets you up for problems with the adrenals. So if you can switch to having a high protein breakfast and then almost no carbs or very, very little in the morning, that would be ideal. And then as you're approaching midday and evening, you can start to incorporate some carbohydrates into your diet. And by some, I mean about half cup of quinoa or half cup of rice to go with your meals. So not kind of like 2 cups of pasta. That would be way too much. But having a proper amount of carbohydrate is actually helpful for adrenals. So if somebody is in adrenal fatigue and goes on a full paleo diet with 0 carbohydrates, that sometimes will be taxing to the system. So we do want some, but most of us eat too much. So this is the general rule of thumb with eating for macronutrients. But today we're going to focus more on specifics of what to do with your lifestyle and micronutrients with regards to the different phases of adrenal fatigue or adrenal stress. So a little bit of a history is back in the 1900s, a researcher called Hans Selye was born, and he is credited to be one of the scientists who discovered a relationship between stress and health. So that really hasn't been too long ago, just within the last century, that we had discoveries about this. And then there was another woman whose name was Candace Pert, and she wrote the book called Molecules of Emotion. And she's also one of the pioneers who discovered that emotions and molecules and biochemistry are related to health, and that they're not just part of the psychology field, but they affect your physiology. So Candace just passed away in 2013. Hans Selye wrote articles about different phases of adrenal fatigue, which you've seen when I've showed you some of the adrenal hormone testing curves. So when we have the three types, there are different names for them, but those three types are basically based off of Hans Selye's model of the adrenal response. So the first one is called the stressed go-getter, and that's what I named it. And that's basically the stressed type. And this person is usually the least depleted, and generally they have high cortisol levels. So that happens first. If somebody just has more workload to do or going through something, this happens first, and cortisol spiked, so it's usually high, and you'll feel more kind of anxious or pressured, time pressured, and you might be fast and just go, go, go. Now, number two, I called it the thinking perfectionist, or we have the wired and tired. So this is the second stage of adrenal imbalance, where we're starting to see kind of fluctuations in the cortisol curve. So it can be high or low, or just imbalanced at different times of the day. Oftentimes there's a switching where cortisol becomes low in the morning, which is not good because then you're sluggish and can't wake up or feel tired in the morning. And then cortisol becomes high at night, which is not what it's supposed to be. And people can have problems with insomnia. So that's the second stage, where usually there's a mix of a feeling of stress as well as some kind of fatigue. And then as that keeps progressing, if we don't do anything to manage it, then Dr. Hans Selye said that the last state is the overwhelmed and exhausted brain and body type. So that exhausted type becomes where the person feels mostly tired. So there's usually kind of a transition to getting more and more and more exhausted as the system just has to deal with this over a longer period of time. So we'll look at all three of these, because nobody usually stays in all three of these for their whole life. And so it's really important for you to recognize if you're in one of these categories. And then if you recognize you're in one of these categories, there's some very specific things that you can do that's different for each type that you can use to get yourself out of that state. So it's not that there's only one good regimen for adrenals, not at all, because we have to look at the different states of where you're in and then what to do. So by the end of today, you're going to be able to tell a little bit more about that. You might start to recognize even some of these patterns in your friends and start identifying these patterns. Now, there's another book that's very awesome, and this is a Stanford professor. His name is Robert Sapolsky. And Robert Sapolsky wrote a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's actually a very fun read, and it'll explain to you a little bit more if you want to get into more of the science of this and understand how all these HPA axis hormones play a role. So that's hypothalamus, adrenals, hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis. They talk to each other and how they work, and how they even affect other hormones in your body, like your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone. All right, so let's go to type number 1. So this is the stressed go-getter type. So this type is mostly stressed and associated with a normal to high cortisol level. Sometimes the person will have high levels of epinephrine, which is adrenaline, and also a high neurotransmitter called glutamate. Now think of glutamate as electricity. It keeps firing and firing and firing, and it's zapping your brain. So the person's brain never really shuts off. It's always on, the light's always on, and it's kind of going too fast. Now, when it goes too fast, it's not going to operate optimally, so some of the other brain functions, such as concentration or focus, may not be that great. It's not like your brain's working super fast, efficiently. Do not confuse glutamate with something that's very beneficial for your intestinal tract called glutamine. So glutamine helps to repair leaky gut. And a lot of my patients confuse these two. So they're two separate things. They have nothing to do with each other. Glutamate is a brain neurotransmitter associated with stress and anxiety. So you can go easily from being in a balanced state within a matter of days into the stress state with certain triggers. And you'll get the tools today to recognize if you are in the state and strategies to move your body and your nervous system back into balance. This is the most acute state, the stressed state. Sometimes you can go from feeling completely balanced and something happens, you hear some bad news or somebody says something to you that triggers, and you can go into the state for perhaps a couple of days and be out of balance. That can happen really easily. And the faster you know how to get out of the state, the better. Now, some people are going to be in this state for months and months in a row as well. So some of the symptoms to recognize if you're in this type 1 stressed state is feeling anxiety, feeling stress, pressure, time pressure, muscle tension, sometimes abdominal tension, feeling that knot in your stomach, a fast heart rate, difficulty sleeping, sometimes feeling lightheaded, feeling tension headaches, or just feeling slightly tired, not that tired, but you can kind of push through it. So here are some strategies that you can do if you're basically feeling predominantly stressed. It's really important in this case, even though you crave sodium, crave salt, that you keep it at a low enough level, so less than 3,000 milligrams. So you can track your sodium intake with basically the app that we talked about before called MyFitnessPal. And you can just type in some of the foods you eat and get a little idea of how much sodium you're intaking every day. So people who are stressed tend to crave a lot of salt. People who are bored with life, if they want excitement, they're an adventurous type, but they sometimes feel like they're lacking that spice in their life, may tend to crave really spicy foods. And then people who feel sad or depressed are more likely to crave carbohydrates or sugars. So these are some cravings that's interesting to note. With sodium, what happens is that sodium causes you to retain the stress hormone cortisol in your body. So cortisol is secreted when you're stressed, and this is natural, but you want to eliminate it. And it takes about 4 hours for you to eliminate half of the cortisol that you produce that's excessive. And one of the good ways to eliminate the excessive cortisol is by moving the body. So reduce your sodium so that your body can clear cortisol faster, so you start to feel less anxious. Also, coffee is a stimulant. It tends to cause the heart to race and it keeps you more ramped up. So it's best not to have coffee if you're already in a stress state, but if you have to have it, it's best to just have it in the morning and then don't have it after 9 a.m. in the morning. So again, this is something about timing. Even though you want to do something, if you adjust the timing a little bit, you're going to have a little bit better success. Coffee has a component called theophylline, And theophylline stimulates the heart rate to increase. So that's something that you don't want in the case of stress. And even though both coffee and tea have caffeine, tea also has a component called theanine, which is calming. It has a calming effect. And tea also has many good antioxidants that are supportive to the body. Tea has also a much lower amount of caffeine than coffee does. So caffeine is not necessarily always a bad thing. It does seem that the way that most commercial coffees are processed with chemicals also have a negative effect on the body. And if you have to have coffee, having some organic coffee is really good. There's a company called Bulletproof, and they also have some really good information there, but they have coffee that's of a better quality. So I don't personally drink coffee, but if you do, that's some tips about it. Now, if you're the stressed type 1, it's really important to have 30 grams of protein for breakfast, because as your blood sugar drops from not having the protein, you're going to start to feel more anxious. So that low blood sugar feeling is often very closely related to a stress-like feeling. So when your blood sugar is low, you might feel shaky, irritable, hard to concentrate, super hungry, anxious, moody. That's very similar to a stress type. So sometimes that's physiologic, and you can balance that a lot more by just keeping that protein in first thing in the morning. So 30 grams sounds like a lot. So how do you get that? For example, if you have a protein smoothie, so usually it's about 15 grams of protein in about a couple scoops of protein powder, and you have a couple eggs, you'll be getting the 14 grams. And you can actually split that up if that feels like too much food. You can have the smoothie first and then have the eggs maybe an hour later. That would be fine. Another example is you can have a palm-sized portion of chicken breast, so that's about 20 grams of protein. And you can do a veggie omelet, so throw some veggies in it, and the couple eggs would be, if you're using one egg, it would be 7 grams, 2 eggs, 14 more grams. So there you can get just about 30 or a little bit more grams of protein for your breakfast. So that's not really too hard. You can also be non-traditional and do things like a lentil soup or a chili with turkey in it, so some kind of a lunch food that's higher in protein as well. So you don't have to have traditional breakfast type foods to get that. Now, here are some foods that you can use to your advantage. So none of these foods are going to have such a huge effect that you need to worry that, let's say, if you had the opposite, that you can't have any of it. But you can keep foods in mind to help support whatever state you're in and just have more of those. So these have a subtle effect, but consistent subtle effects over time work really well in your favor. So if you're really stressed, you have high levels of cortisol. So you want to have foods that decrease the amount of your cortisol levels. So think about basil, celery, beets, walnuts, and cacao nibs. Now I'll tell you a really nice recipe that I've made for dessert that includes the cacao nibs and is delicious. So it's a little chia seed strawberry pudding that I make. So you can just buy some chia seeds at Trader Joe's. And by the way, chia seeds have a really high amount of good fats, which are very good for your brain. And when you have good fats for your brain, that is really helpful for your nervous system to be balanced. So put some chia seeds and stir it in with almond milk. And you'll stir it for a little bit, and the chia seeds will start to grow, so they'll thicken. So you don't want to put too much, because as they expand, you might have your pudding to be a little bit too thick. So play with that a little bit and stir it in. And then you can throw in some cacao nibs. So the cacao nibs are very, very bitter, but they also help you reduce cortisol. So it does have a little bit of caffeine, but it also has a nice medicinal effect. Kind of tastes like chocolate, but without all the sugar in it. So throw some of that in, and then you can slice up some strawberries, mix it in. And if you like to put a little bit of cinnamon, you can, or you can leave it alone. And I usually eat it just like that and refrigerate it. It's delicious. You can sprinkle a little bit of granola on top if you like. If you need to, you can add a little bit of honey as a natural sweetener, but it actually tastes pretty good without the honey as well. So here's a recipe for you with the cacao nibs and the chia seeds. You can even throw some walnuts in there, get some more protein in that dessert. Now, when you're stressed, there are going to be some nutrients that you're going to have that are depleted. So these are some foods that really help balance your body's constitution if you tend to be really stressed. So kiwis, lemons, sweet potatoes, yams, almonds, and adzuki beans. Now, most of us probably haven't heard of adzuki beans. They're red colored beans, and they are available usually at Whole Foods in the bulk section, and Asians use this again for dessert. So I'm actually talking about dessert twice now, but we're not going to make them really sweet. So this is going to be high protein. If you want to cook the azuki beans in water till they're really soft, and then you can strain them and add some almond milk again. So it's going to be a little bit sweet. You can add a little bit of honey. You can add some orange or lemon rind and cook it. And that's something you can actually have for breakfast. It's like a little sweeter bean type soup that has a little orange zest flavor to it. It's quite good if you like the flavor. It's a little bit different. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about adzuki beans when we get into Chinese medicine, because that also helps another type of body type if you tend to that type of imbalance. Let's go to exercise now for the stressed type. So you want to lift weights. Lifting weights and strength training decreases cortisol. Stretching or yoga is really good for calming the nervous system. There's a saying that when the muscles are long, you feel you belong. So if you feel stressed and not safe, you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm just worrying about everything. You don't feel safe. You feel pressure from your job, from your boss, from people around you. You feel like you're just being cornered, or you feel like your situation isn't that great. How is tomorrow going to be? How is next year going to be? You're worried. You don't feel safe. Well, a lot of times our circumstances have a better chance of changing for the better when your mindset is better, when your mindset is strong and you feel in control in a healthy way, and you feel like you're attracting something good and taking the steps towards it. So one of the ways to really snap yourself out of this feeling of feeling trapped or cornered and stressed at the same time is sometimes not necessarily thinking more about your problems. You need to get into your body. So when you get into your body, you get out of your mind. And when you get into your body, you want to stretch the muscles. So as the muscles lengthen, it has a trigger for the parasympathetic nervous system, and you will all of a sudden very, very quickly feel this right away, that you feel so much more grounded, that you don't freak out as much. It just totally shifts. So here's a little tip for you. Now, if you're really stressed, you may want to limit the cardio type of activities, because if you're going at your maximum heart rate or reaching close to that, you can really spike and raise your cortisols. So you might want to do light cardio, but not intense cardio if you're super stressed. And if you do want to do kind of a more intense cardio, then do it before 2 p.m. Don't do it late in the evening. But if you want to walk slowly, just for a really nice leisurely stroll in the evening for like 10 to 15 minutes, that can be really calming as well. So these are some specific exercise strategies for the stressed type. And when we talk about different types, there are going to be different ways that you exercise that's more beneficial for the other types. So you can manipulate even the types of exercises you do and the timing of when you do the exercises to fit a certain state that you're in, and that will give you a lot more success in helping your body. So all things are good, like eating protein and exercise. They're very basic, but when you can fine tune and know what time to do when and how, then you're really going, and it'll add a lot more to your results. These are some exercises you can do to help calm yourself. So alternate nostril breathing. So you're covering one nostril, breathing in one, and then you cover the other one, and you exhale out. So it's kind of in a circular motion that you're breathing. So do it one way, and then you can do it the opposite direction and feel if you breathe in the left or the right, you feel better. So play with that. We won't have time to do it today. I want to share quite a bit with you. But definitely review this and try out a few things that work for you. I do suggest that if you pick your type, go through this presentation again and pick 3 to 4 things you're going to do for your type and write it out in a schedule and decide what time of day you're going to do that. If you do this, you're going to feel results. If you just know it in your head, then you're not really going to get any results. So definitely put it into action. Progressive muscle relaxation is basically breathing into a certain muscle of the body. So you're scanning the whole body, one body part at a time, and then consciously saying, relax, release. When somebody's really stressed, they usually have problems with sleep. Here's a chart with the Chinese medicine depiction of what time of day is correlated to which organ system of the body. It's really neat because we often see that there are problems with living a certain way, and this is why it's important that we address the circadian rhythm. So looking at this chart, you can see that the liver is highlighted between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. So if somebody wakes up and has insomnia at those times, you might think, oh, is there an issue with the liver? Or on the flip side, if somebody stays up really late and habitually sleeps at maybe 2 a.m. or something like that, it could be harder on their liver to do the work that it needs to do when you're supposed to be asleep. Now, liver helps to detoxify and is associated when there's an imbalance with anger, frustration, and also insomnia. So think about that if you're suffering from some sleep issues. The gallbladder is highlighted during 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. And the liver's job is to metabolize fats and is associated when it's imbalanced to sometimes a feeling of just being really hard on yourself, feeling bad about yourself, feeling like you're not good enough, or you have to do a lot of tasks or be something to prove yourself to other people. So these people can work really, really hard and not even realize it of what's behind it? Why am I working so hard? So that's kind of a question to ask. And a lot of times there might be an issue with fat metabolism and weight gain also with that imbalance. So you want to sleep between 9 and 11 p.m. if you can. That is the time of the triple burner. So what is the triple burner? Well, triple burner doesn't actually have an organ that it's associated with in Chinese medicine. So you're learning a lot of different words today. The triple burner is mostly related to the way that it balances water in your body. So being hydrated is good. So that's good. Now, damp in Chinese medicine is not good. Damp can be associated with different health problems. So we want to be hydrated. We want ourselves to be hydrated, but damp is something different. It's almost like an accumulation of water, and it doesn't really move, and it's more like the edema type swelling, but more metaphoric in the different organs. So we have 3 burners. Number 1 is the upper burner, and that's associated with your heart and your lungs. So if you have dampness in your upper burner, you might have a lot of mucus in your chest and respiratory system. Number 2, you have a middle burner, and that's mostly related to your digestion, your stomach, your spleen. And if you have dampness in your middle burner, you might feel indigestion, loose stools, alternating constipation, diarrhea, but more kind of like sticky stools, bloating in your abdominal area, maybe a slight nausea, or just feeling very bloated and uncomfortable after you eat. Other problems with the middle burner of dampness can be made worse by eating foods such as cheeses, dairy products, sugars, and sweets. That actually promotes more damp, which is not good and kind of really bad for the stomach. Now, the lower burner, if there's dampness there, it's associated more with the intestines, kidneys, bladders, reproductive organs. So if people have problems, females like ovarian cysts and fibroids and things like that, that's associated with more dampness in those areas, or more vaginal discharge. For men, prostate problems, or men and women, if you feel like there's a lot of stickiness in the genital areas, that it's hard to keep that area dry, or if it's itchy, all of those symptoms are related to dampness in the lower burner. And so we were talking about azuki beans earlier. Azuki beans are really good for relieving a damp constitution if that happens. So we talked a little bit about the constitutions. There are lots of other Chinese medicine type imbalances, and a damp imbalance is not necessarily associated with a stress type. So you could have another stress type and also have this imbalance. So I just wanted to be clear about it, but here's where I brought it up when we talked about sleep and the time of day associated with the triple burners. Wanted to explain that to you a little bit more. So if you have any of these symptoms, you can talk to me a little bit more with our private consultations, and we can really address what type of imbalance you have and how to fine-tune that further. With regards to sleep, definitely doing some of those calming rituals that we talked about earlier, such as the progressive muscle relaxation as well as the alternate nostril breathing, can really help bring your nervous system to a calm and out of that stress type so you can sleep. Going into supplements, if you're in this type 1, is do not take licorice. So licorice is really something you see very often in health food stores for adrenal health. Licorice increases the half-life of cortisol. So if you already have high cortisol, that's a really bad idea to take it. Also, it can increase blood pressure as well. So you definitely don't want to take licorice if you have hypertension and stress at the same time. Now, there are supplements called DGL, deglycerinated licorice, that people use to help with digestive issues. That is okay. So that form of licorice has the ingredient that affects cortisol taken out, the ingredient that affects actually both cortisol and hypertension. So you can take DGL for your stomach, that's no problem, but not the pure licorice. Metagenics has 2 supplements. One is called Tran Q. Tran Q is really good if you feel stressed, frustrated, and irritated. Another supplement by Metagenics is called Serenagen, really good for the stress type as well. And that's if you feel stressed and more frazzled and ungrounded, and perhaps having a racing mind at night and can't sleep. It just kind of runs on its own. You can also use some teas such as lemon balm, passion flora, or chamomile, lavender to have before bed. These herbs all have an effect of calming the nervous system. And if you do this consistently, you'll often notice a shift. So teas, you seem like, oh, they're not that powerful, but if you have a couple tea bags, you might notice some effects from that. The Tran Q and the Serenagen you can get on my website, modernintegrativemedicine.com. Just go to Metagenics and you can order those. Let's go to type number 2. So now we're switching into incorporating along the stress with some symptoms also of fatigue. So the person might have been stressed for a long time and the body's starting to feel drained. So the person's starting to have a mixture of both perhaps anxiety or just feeling pressured, fast, as well as starting to feel maybe even at some times of the days dips in energy levels. So cortisol levels can be too high, too low, or at different times just imbalanced, or the circadian curve of the cortisol can be completely flipped and opposite. So when we look at type number 2, the thinking perfectionist, the person who's both wired and tired, they might have some problems making decisions, they might feel brain fog, kind of just a little spacey, losing their keys, forgetting people's names, hard to concentrate, especially when tired. When you look at some simple tasks you have to do, maybe just balancing your checkbook or writing something that's simple just feels overwhelming. That's kind of a sign that you're in the second adrenal state, the wired and the tired. You might feel sluggish in the morning waking up, and then at night is finally when you feel better, but then you can't go to sleep. You might have dips in energy levels throughout the day at different times, maybe an afternoon dip or something like that. Feeling wired or unsettled, and physiologically the reserved curve. So one of the biggest keys when you're both wired and tired in the second type is that you create some routines. So this type, the key to it is routine. And this person who's wired and tired is probably somebody who doesn't have a routine very much, who's running around here and there, just last minute in a hurry, erratic schedules, or so busy they don't even have a time to eat, and they eat in front of the computer or eat at really odd times. So this is a decision that you have to make for your body to value it. And I want to tell you that sometimes when you're so busy, you feel like the last thing I want to do is eat food. Like, that's not important. My paperwork's more important, or sleeping or exercising, whatever for yourself is not important, but the tasks are more important in your priority list. Well, let me tell you something, that if you can even change that in your mindset to value yourself, you will miraculously, you have to try this to believe me, feel that your tasks are much more under control when you are in a better state. Your mind works at a totally different way when you're in state, when you're kind of in the zone. And so routine for this person, if you're in the wired and tired state. So decide the best time for eating and stick with that as much as possible. And then also, because it's likely to have difficulty sleeping as well with the state for some people, that if you sleep at a consistent time and wake up at a relatively consistent time, maybe half an hour to 1 hour variation, but you don't want to do really more than that, because that actually throws your body off more. So for the wired and the tired type, do not have sugars or carbs even if you tend to crave them, because the blood sugar fluctuations will make it more difficult for you to focus and can even cause more of those memory issues if you have them. So you might feel really bad. You feel like, oh, I have to have it, and then you eat it and you feel like crap. So keep it out of your cupboards. Don't have it in your house, and you're less likely to eat that. You can use cinnamon to balance your blood sugar. So add a little bit that as a condiment to some of the less sweet things you use. So you can use fruit. That's okay. So fruit in moderation, maybe 1 to 3 a day. That's totally okay. And you can use some of the recipes I used earlier. Those are not really that sweet if you're wanting that taste. Now, bitter melon's really bitter. It doesn't taste that good, but it's very good for balancing blood sugar. Something that does taste good, Ultra Meal Plus 360 by Metagenics contains acacia, which affects the genetic expression of your body in relationship to blood sugar management, and really helps set that into place. So this is a protein powder with a goal of balancing blood sugar, and it's actually been studied to have a positive effect in reversing metabolic syndrome. So if somebody has one of 3 of these: overweight, increased waist to hip ratio, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, and overweight, they will benefit from using this Ultra Meal Plus 360, because it's been shown by studies of changing some of these parameters in your physiology. The fifth one was actually cholesterol levels as well, high cholesterol. I think I said weight twice. So that's your Ultrameal Plus 360. So if you're feeling wired and tired, dips in energy because of your blood sugar being unstable, the Ultrameal Plus 360 can be really, really helpful, as well as some of the foods that we talked about last time and how you eat for that. Some foods that help to balance that circadian rhythm of cortisol include barley, white bean, cabbage, and Brazil nuts. Sauerkraut is also really good. Sauerkraut made out of cabbage that has probiotics. Really, really good. Barley, according to Chinese medicine, is really good for draining damp. So we talked about damp earlier when we mentioned about Chinese medicine. So you can have damp in any of these 3 adrenal states. Barley is really good for draining that. Barley does have gluten, so if you're intolerant to gluten, then don't use that. Now, foods that are also nutritive for the state are bok choy, spinach, pumpkin seeds, oysters, cinnamon, and ginger. Now, let's talk a little bit about Chinese medicine again. Let's talk about yin deficiency. So yin is opposed to yang. So if you think about yin and yang, you can compare them, such as yang is more about passion, doing, daytime, energetic, maybe forceful, powerful, invigorated, moving. That's yang. Yang's also associated with hot, heat, all of that. Now, yin is the opposite. Yin is associated with nighttime, cooling, nurturing, calming, relaxing, restorative, rebuilding, cooling, anti-inflammatory. So that's your yin. Now, your kidney yin specifically, and the kidney system in Chinese medicine is associated with the western adrenal glands. So if you're adrenally depleted, you're often also yin deficient. So the yin deficient person doesn't have enough calming energy. So what it looks like if you're yin deficient is that you'll have a racing mind, you'd feel stressed easily. All of those types of symptoms are yin deficiency. And when the adrenals are depleted and yin is depleted, that means the person is actually kind of tired. Their body's a little drained. They don't have enough of that energy of what it takes to calm down. And so when you sleep, you restore. Now, if you're too depleted, overtired, sometimes you can't even fall asleep. Some people are so tired, but they can't fall asleep. That's because they're so depleted, they don't have the energy of what it takes to turn the body off. It's very ironic. And so they really need yin tonics. And there's some herbs that I can give to people if that state is really, really severe. But some foods that nourish the yin that you can use are seaweed. Fruits such as like pears, apple, peaches, pomegranates, those are really good for nourishing the yin. Any kind of seeds, so like sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, things like that. Eggs, yams, and sweet potatoes, those all help build the yin. They're very nourishing. So if a person's very depleted, any root vegetables such as like yams or even carrots, things like that, will help give some vitality to the person if you're feeling kind of run down, because there's lots of energy stored in the roots underground. So you can take advantage of that with the foods that you choose to eat. If you're yin deficient though, you want to cut back on foods that are too stimulating, such as spicy foods or fried foods. Now, sometimes people have too much heat. So if you feel like you get night sweats, or you're flushed, or you have a lot of inflammation, you get angry really easily, those are some symptoms of too much heat in the body, according to Chinese medicine. So if you tend to run really hot, you can have chrysanthemum tea, and that helps to balance the constitution. If you're the opposite of having too much heat, if you're super depleted, so you're kind of running cold hands, cold feet, you're always freezing, you feel kind of weak, you feel like your vitality is drained, then, and maybe you have a tendency to catch colds a little bit more easily, then American ginseng would be a really good herb to have to balance the constitution that way. Now back to type number 2, wired and tired. So with all the Chinese medicine that I'm throwing in here and some foods you can use, it can apply to any of the 3 stress types. So I'm just kind of putting in there because some of the types might draw a little bit more of those imbalances, but it doesn't mean that it can't occur across the board. So back to type 2, you're both kind of anxious, stressed, and you're also tired. You don't want to exercise before bed because these people are likely to already have high cortisol at night. So you may want to do aerobic activities though, or high intensity workouts in the morning because your cortisol is probably low in the morning and those high intensity workouts can raise your cortisol at that time. So it's all about timing. Exercise helps you move qi, and also if you feel kind of a stuck sensation, so stagnation in Chinese medicine is associated with pain or any kind of tumor or growth or kind of soreness, that's stagnation. It's energy that's basically held in a certain place and not moving, and that creates a lot of physical illness. Now to help move the qi and whatever is stuck, that's associated with maybe you feel like a ball of stress and you're just holding on to everything. To release that, just move the body. So physical activity, aerobic activity can really just help to balance that without, again, you having to think through all your problems. That often doesn't really help. You might want to do alternate days of aerobic, interval training, strength training exercises, and do those all in the morning. So if you're stressed and tired, do that and alternate that. So exercise in the morning. If you want to do something at night, you can do something gentler like restorative yoga or yin yoga in the evening. But don't do vinyasa or like the heated yoga at night because those are a little bit too stimulating. If you have difficulty concentrating, you can do inverted poses such as downward dog or shoulder stands. Be careful for your neck on the shoulder stand, but that can bring some blood flow to the brain and help if you feel mentally fatigued. So kind of turn yourself upside down if you need a little bit of blood flow to your head. Be careful if you've had a tendency to strokes or anything like that or passing out, but otherwise with a healthy person, that can be helpful. All right, so do you have insomnia? So important again for this type is routine, routine, routine. So if you can devise something where you have some anchors throughout the day, that would really help set you to feel a lot more safe and your body can relax and your body can also replenish. To help with your liver, if you have insomnia, sometimes the liver fire will rise at night. So if a person has problems staying asleep, Adva-Clear from Metagenics, which helps the liver detoxify, has worked really well for a lot of my patients. A lot of times you won't think of using a liver supplement for insomnia, but especially if somebody cannot stay asleep, that works really well, perhaps a couple before bedtime. Now, if you have problems falling asleep, melatonin is usually better. So there's a difference. If you have a circadian rhythm that's not very set, it's really nice to use a very small dosage of melatonin, such as 0.5 milligrams at about the time of sunset to start your body to produce more melatonin and say, hey, it's nighttime, it's about time to wind down. If people take too much melatonin, maybe 2 to 3 milligrams before bed, sometimes they feel a little bit groggy in the morning. So low dose is really nice to help reset your rhythm. And then once it's reset, you don't have to use it anymore. And then if you have problems sleeping, expose yourself to bright light in the morning. So maybe go out in the sun for a walk. There's something called binaural beats. You might have seen those on the internet, and you can use different binaural beat tracks. What they do is you have to use headphones for them, and you have to have headphones that will say it goes down to, close to maybe 3 hertz or something like that, because a lot of headphones, I believe, only go down to 20 hertz. So you don't get the lower tones. But these tones go into your right and left ears. So they only work if you use headphones. They don't work if you're playing them out in the air. But these tones and beats will help to change your brain waves. So if you need a certain brainwave to concentrate or study, you can choose those tracks. Or if you need one to put you into a brainwave that gets you ready to go to sleep, you can choose those tracks as well. So you can find some of those on the internet, and sometimes that can be really helpful as well. Supplements for wired and tired. Exhilarin is really good if you feel like you have issues focusing and you also feel fatigued and stressed. We talked about the Ultrameal Plus 360 as a protein powder to support the blood sugar. A B complex is really good if you're tired. So you can do Cortico B5, B6, or Glycogenics. They're both B complexes from Metagenics. I would use the Cortico B5, B6 if you're feeling really tired, like at the beginning of a treatment. And then the Glycogenics is a complete B complex that can be used more for maintenance. If you need to use Tran Q or Serenagen, like we talked about with the stress type to help with the stress, you can use those as well. And then we talked about melatonin and Advoclear for the different insomnia types if you have that. So finally, let's go to the last type. So our last type is the most depleted type. It's the exhausted brain and body. This type, you just feel like you're crashed. It's kind of, you pushed for a long time and your body's not happy. It wants to compensate for you, but it just can't anymore. And so the person's usually pretty weak and depleted in this type. And hopefully nobody ever stays in this type for a long, long time. And the good news is if somebody just started being crashed, if they do what I talk about, they should even notice that they're changing and turning around in a week or week and a half. But you don't want to keep putting your body in this type, because the longer you do, it's going to be harder and harder to recover, and you're going to develop chronic diseases. So cortisol is usually going to be now below the normal curve. Your body is very, very fatigued, not making much of it. You might even start to see low thyroid hormones as well. So DHEA might be low. It's a precursor hormone. Thyroid, you might start to have low thyroid. You might have low estrogen, testosterone. Low libido is really common as well as maybe difficulties maintaining a pregnancy. So some hormonal imbalances there. So because the body has been burned out for so long, there might be very likely other health problems, like maybe autoimmune diseases that come along with it, or a lot of people have some digestive issues that go along with this in addition to the adrenal issues. So in the exhausted type, these are some of the symptoms that people find. Basically just really, really fatigued. You're in the state if you just feel like you want to sit on the couch or you're just done. It's really hard to do anything. Blood pressure might be a little bit too low. We don't want high blood pressure, but if it's kind of systolics under 100, some people are running 95 over 60, that's too low. That means your adrenals are really, really exhausted. Now, about the diet, we talked about excess versus deficiency, right, in Chinese medicine. So excess states might be oily skin, very angry inflammatory conditions, extreme pain, high fever. Those are excessive states. Deficient states are more everything's low. So you might on your blood test have low red blood cells, low white blood cells, low albumin levels, low potassium. The body's just really depleted. So we want to build that body back up so you have more vitality. When somebody's really exhausted, even though raw foods are really good and we have a lot of proponents for raw foods, sometimes raw foods are really hard to digest if you're just eating that. So a raw food diet, that's not the time to have that if you're in the exhausted state. So again, it's timing. Raw foods are great. They have lots of enzymes, but this is not the time to do that. And you might want to do more cooked vegetables and soups, warm liquids. So even temperature matters. You want to have warmer foods, like things that are heated up. If you're very exhausted, you don't want to be having ice cream or frozen smoothies. You don't want to have like a lot of super, super freezing cold items, or only eat salad the whole day. You know, that doesn't build up your chi. So just be careful with that. You want to have lots of soups and stews. Chicken soup, turkey soup, if you do that as a base that you make yourself and then throw in a ton of vegetables, that's super restorative. So if you drink that every single day, if you're super exhausted, that really helps to build your body from a food perspective. Because your digestion's likely to be weak if you're in the exhausted state, you want to have smaller, frequent meals. So never stuff yourself, because you want to give your digestive system a chance to be able to process the foods that you have. You might need to supplement a little bit with some hydrochloric acid. Your stomach acid might be low, so hard to digest and break down protein, or your pancreatic enzymes like amylase, pepsidase, those pancreatic enzymes can be low, which in your colon, small intestines are needed to further break down your food. So then you don't feel as bloated or malnutrition, because sometimes in this state, even though you eat, you're not absorbing all the nutrients. Now, foods that help you conserve cortisol because it's so low: turmeric, sea salt, maca, ginseng, grapefruit molasses, sesame seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds. These are really great if you're exhausted. Try to have a little bit more of those. See, that's the opposite. You really don't want to have too much salt if you're stressed, but if you're exhausted, actually having a little bit more salt can sometimes help. Can help raise your blood pressure a little bit too if it's too low. And then I might even do a potassium supplement, because you don't want to have too much sodium, but you can definitely have some sodium here. That's not a problem. Now, exhausted state, exercise. You may be too exhausted to exercise, so just gauge yourself. If you feel drained after working out, then don't do it. Recuperate first, and you'll be able to exercise in the future. So exercise is good, but it's all about timing. If you're exhausted, then it's time to just recuperate yourself. But if you want to do some gentle yoga, such as yin yoga, restorative yoga, even do like half a class or gauge your body, that can be something that can help you put yourself into the parasympathetic calming nervous system. Or a short, slow walk. Those are some things you can do, but maybe not aerobic exercises or heavy weightlifting, not right now. Now, exhausted, lifestyle hacks. So what can we do? So we want to restore your vital force, your chi, with heat. So actually, temperature can do something. So you can take some warm baths around 100 degrees. Because you're so weak, you don't want to go into something like 110-degree hot tub or hot spring or something like that. That's too hot. You could pass out. Takes too much energy. But just kind of a little bit above body temperature at about 100 degrees is really good to warm you up, to kind of give that heat into the body. And you can use some Epsom salts to replenish magnesium, because magnesium is probably really low, very likely in this state. And magnesium is important for about 300 different biochemical processes in the body. So when you're stressed, magnesium is really low, and that's another mineral that's really important that you want to put back into your body. If you're really sensitive, some people tend to be more energetically sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies, such as those emitted by cell phones, computers, all these kind of wireless signals around. You can use actually baking soda and sea salt, which has a lot of the negative ions that help draw this toxic EMF effect out of the body. So some people who are susceptible to the EMF toxicity just feel really ungrounded. And when they do this baking soda sea salt bath, they can just feel so much more connected to who they are and grounded and much more clear. You can add some essential oils like rose or lavender to your bath, the hot bath, to restore your chi. You could even use infrared saunas or a hot sauna if you have access to those, to use heat to restore your chi. If your blood pressure is too low, then just be careful about fainting in the sauna. With the saunas, I say usually stay in there for about 10 minutes, and then you can go take a shower. If you want to go in again, you can. But take it easy if you're exhausted. Just kind of warm up a little bit. So more about the lifestyle hacks for the exhausted state. Now, again, you should be able to get out of the state. You shouldn't be in the exhausted state if you're doing some of the work we're talking about. So tops, you better be out of the state in a month. So within this short period of time of just rehabilitating yourself, you might want to do nothing for a few days. So think about what it is that you can let go of. And think about if your friend was really sick, what would you do? If your family member was really sick, would you drop everything and just go take care of them and help them? So, but when it comes to you, is that something else you do? You just try to push through? So treat yourself as good as you treat other people or better. Think about how it feels to put yourself first. That's really, really important. A lot of times how we even got to where we are is that we never stopped to value ourselves. We're often taught when we grow up that other people are more important, or we have to do this, and we associate our value with our accomplishments and achievements. But you're already valuable. So just really remember that you are valuable right now, right here, and just because you are you is valuable, and that there are some things you add to other people's lives and the world that you don't realize they appreciate it, or even if it doesn't seem apparent that they do, you do add. So, but you won't be able to give unless you yourself are in a place where you're replenished. So take that time, let yourself enjoy, let yourself rest, and that's really important to do this now, especially if you've gotten to this state. You might need to get 9 to 10 hours of sleep or even more until you feel restored. So just kind of making up on that and allowing yourself to also receive. So it's beautiful. So part of actually giving to other people is allowing them to give to you. It seems really weird and paradoxical, but you're giving other people blessing when you allow them to also give to you, and that you gratefully and graciously receive. So now's a really good time to practice that, even if that kind of makes you uncomfortable. If you're exhausted, these are some supplements that are really important. You really need electrolytes. Endura is a great product. It has a lot of potassium in it as well. So we talked about that for this state a little bit earlier. Adreset by Metagenics has the ginsengs. Those really help to rebuild your chi and your immune system. It has cordyceps mushrooms also. So if you tend to get viral infections really easily and you're really tired, Adreset's great. Licorice Plus would be great to use. You can use licorice here if you're exhausted because your cortisol is so low. You absolutely don't want to use licorice if you're in the stressed state. So it's different. Cortico B5, B6. There's a supplement called Adrenagen, which basically is the adrenal glands from animals. And it's a glandular that I only use temporarily to help kind of give the adrenal gland a little boost. So somehow the glandulars do really well in an acute state using it just temporarily. And then if there are digestive issues and there's some need of support, I'll use some Metagest, which is hydrochloric acid. So if you need stomach acid, if your stomach acid is low, and then if not, and you just need some digestive support, then the digestive enzymes aziopangan is really good as well. So the last two are more for the digestive system. So in summary for today, we talked about the 3 types, and now you know what to do for the 3 types. First, recognize that, and then determine what type you are, or if you're not in any of those states, congratulations, this is awesome. And just keep doing balancing activities to keep yourself grounded, to keep yourself balanced. That's really important. Know yourself, know what it takes to keep you healthy, to keep you happy, to keep you inspired. And if you're in these states, look over the presentation again, just that segment of it. And I do want you to choose 1 to 4 things that you're going to do and what time you're going to do them. And just follow that. And that would really get you results when you take the action. So number 1, if you're stressed, you need to ground. You need to change your gestalt. That's kind of like your perception of the world. Kind of looking at the world with new eyes. And then get your life into balance. Oftentimes, it's the way that we live that's out of balance that throws us into these imbalanced physical states. Number 2, for the summary, if you're wired and tired, routine, 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 routine. So develop some patterns and get yourself to stick to them, and that'll be very, very helpful to get your life in order. And then lastly, with the exhausted state, you want to rest, receive, and replenish. So why do we want to balance the cortisol and stress levels? What if you say, it's okay if I feel a little stressed, I've been like that my whole life, or it's okay, I'm a little bit tired, you know, I'm used to it, it's okay, I'll just keep trudging along. Well, studies are now showing that there are higher cortisol levels associated with higher death rates from cardiovascular disease. There's some studies that also show that people with that reverse cortisol curve have just an overall higher death rate from all different causes than people who don't. High cortisol levels are also associated with depression. Science Daily reviews a study that shows that a lot of behavioral issues, so if you're looking at even children or adolescents who have behavioral issues, there's a huge correlation with high or low cortisol levels. Cortisol imbalances can affect your memory. So if you're concerned about graceful aging, you want to keep the cortisol levels down so that your brain doesn't get inflammatory damage from the high level of cortisol and glutamate that is secreted by the stress response. And high cortisol level is also linked to bone loss, higher incidence of osteoporosis. So these are just some of the few health issues that you may not think of that are associated with cortisol. Of course, we talked about things like weight gain and loss of muscle and fatigue. Those are all really obvious. So let's put it together. Mindset hacking for a vibrant life. Here you have the chakra wheel. So chakras are energy centers in the body. The Indians kind of relate to that this way. And we have chakras starting from the bottom. The red one is called your root chakra. That helps you feel safe. That's kind of the base of the base. And then you have your second chakra, the orange one, in the lower part of your belly. That's associated with the energy of your sexuality, being just confident in who you are, feeling that you're handsome or beautiful. And the sexuality is really connected to your creativity, your inspiration, your imagination. So to have ideas flow, that chakra has to be open. If you feel like you're dry on ideas, that chakra is often blocked. Number 3, the third one is the solar plexus, and that has to do with your identity, knowing who you are and connecting to that. Sometimes we lose who we are in our jobs. We just become our job, or we lose who we are in identifying with I'm a housewife or I'm a mother, or we lose who we are with, you know, being in the military and what our position is. These are some examples, and connecting to that energy makes you feel empowered. The fourth chakra is the heart chakra. That's about connection, love, loving yourself, connecting to other people, friendships. Number 5 is your throat chakra. That's about the ability of you to speak your own truth, to feel congruent with who you are. So what you think and what you say matches. If you think something, you say something different because you're afraid of offending somebody, then there's an imbalance there, and you're going to repress a lot of your feelings, and that can create disease. Number 6, your intuition. That's about clarity of mind, kind of connecting to your gut feeling, being able to make decisions and know that without enough evidence, which we almost never have enough evidences in our life to make decisions, it's always going to be a little bit of a step of faith. There's going to be some unknowns, but being able to decide wisely as much as possible by connecting to that inner voice that you know is right, and then just being able to be confident with that. That's your 6th chakra. And then the 7th is your crown chakra, which is your spirituality and openness. So when you put it all together, when we talk about adrenals and stress, there are so many health physical techniques that we can do. And we talked about that with macronutrients the other time, and today with some more specifics for each of the 3 adrenal disorder states. And just putting it all together, I want to encourage you to balance yourself, balance your lifestyle. And with natural health, we're everything. We are a physical being. We are our mental and emotional being. We're a spiritual being. And None of those are more important than the other, but all three of those need to be in balance for the whole person to be in balance. So I wrote a few affirmations that you can use to help yourself remind yourself and getting kind of in tune with these 7 beautiful energies that you possess and keeping yourself in balance. And oftentimes saying some of these affirmations here and just connecting with your chakras can be really, really helpful with keeping yourself peaceful and grounded. And then I do some more specific work with people who want to work with a particular chakra. We can do that as well. But the first chakra, root, I am safe and have abundant resources. With your sacral chakra, I am sexy and creative. The third, I like who I am. The fourth, I love. The fifth, I confidently speak my truth. Sixth, I trust my inner voice. Seventh, I believe God blesses me with the best. So here we are. Congratulations and thank you so much for all your good work. You have done so, so well. You have so many resources here. I just want to remind you that you have more than enough resources in life. And whatever you need, it may be just right in front of you if you looked and opened yourself. So go into a state of just being in the zone and realize that what you need is in front of you.